Welcome to the Auburn Board of Selectmen minute of February 24th, 2020. As per the open meeting laws, I would ask if anybody's recording this meeting. Seeing none, can we all stand and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first thing we have, I'm going to ask, there was a couple of ladies came in after we got started, and I have a sheet here, sign up for public comment. If you care to sign up for public comment, or you're here for an agenda piece, okay, great. Then we have no public comments tonight. And the first thing we have tonight is an update from Penrose Properties on the redevelopment of Mary D. Stone and Julia Bancroft Schools, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through the board. I want to welcome this evening Charlie Adams, who's the Vice President of Penrose, and he is here to provide the board with a presentation, which you have copies on your desk of the presentation, so you can look at it after. We have posted it on our website so the public can see it as well. It's already up there. And we're very excited. As you know, we put an item on the agenda 2 weeks ago to let the board know that we are very pleased to say that the Penrose Properties did receive the low-income housing tax credits from DHCD, and the the Mary D. project will be moving forward, and we intend on selling the building this June. The Julia Bancroft building should be right behind it by about a year. That will now go into the pipeline for funding. So given all that, I'm just going to turn it over to Charlie to present, and then if the board has any questions, please share them with us.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Town Manager, and other members of the board and folks that are here in the public. We're very excited to be here tonight to give you an update overall on the progress and to really celebrate two major milestones in this project. Obviously, the first one is receiving the award for the credits for Mary D. Stone, and that puts us on a track to get to a closing and construction start in June or July of this year. That also then paved the way for Julia Bancroft to go forward. The two projects couldn't be funded at the same time. We all knew that. But we just submitted, as of last week, an application for the funding for the tax credits for Julia Bancroft. And the state actually just sent an email today. They're going to come out and do a site visit in March, early March, as part of the process for reviewing the application. So two really pieces of exciting news, and puts us on a nice path. With this process, as you guys have heard, there's things we control and things we don't control. So we can control getting the applications in. We can't always control when they're going to give us the funding, but once they give us the funding, then it's back in our control, and so we're moving forward towards getting to a closing on Mary D. Stone. So with that, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update that we've over the, you haven't seen us, but we've been busy getting these applications ready. There's a lot of work that's gone into them. We've done a lot of work with the Historic Commission, try to get these things. So we're going to present some of the new plans. There's nothing dramatically different than what you've seen, but there's just some tweaks and things we've had to make, particularly for the Historic Commission, which has all made the building much better, so we can go through that. So just a little bit, just to kind of update you on the progress to date. This kind of gives you a timeline of how this process has gone along. And it's actually, I would say, sort of ahead of schedule. These projects take a long time to get through. There's a big demand for the credits. It takes 2 or 3 times to go through the round, and we're sort of on the early side of that schedule with the project. So we're very excited about being able to move this forward. So the big punchline of all this is the fact that we did get the award in December, and that we're looking to close this Mary D. Stone, as we said, in June or July of this year. So this gives you a little bit of what we're planning to do going forward. We do have some work to do with the zoning board, not to get too much in the weeds, but the parcel is actually part of the overall site that's with the town hall. So in order to give us the property, we actually have to segregate it off from the rest of the town hall property. So there's a zoning process and A&R that we're going through, working with Shannon and the town manager on that. So then we also want to include the Julia Bancroft timeline. The federal credits application, as I mentioned, went in this February. And then if we're successful, we would probably hear in about August of this year. If we're not, then we'll turn around and we'll resubmit it right away for the next round. And we'll keep doing it until we get them. So Mary Steve Stone, let's talk a little bit about it. So just to remind you, can you see that okay, the site plan? So, okay. Just again, it's 55 units, 47 parking spaces, so almost one for one. You can see the breakdown of the bedrooms. We have a few more two bedrooms than we typically would do here, but because of the nature of the historic renovations, it lends itself to two bedrooms. And about 45 of the 55 units will be what we call restricted for affordable housing. We did have some room to leave some unrestricted, so really the concept is that everyone would have an opportunity to live here at this development. And it gives you some of the amenities that we had talked about, and we'll talk a little bit. So if you look on this slide in particular, I don't know how well you can see it, but the building's a little bit tight, but the center section here, right up in this area, I apologize, you can't see it too clearly, but those are the two entrances. So this is the historic part here. Oh, actually, I should back up, right? So just to remind everybody, there's a historic part, there's three pieces to the building, right? There's the old historic part, then there was a cafeteria, and then a small addition. Those two pieces are coming down. We're demolishing those. We're keeping the old existing part, and then so we're adding on. So the break, this is the, you can't see it, but the front of the building is here. This is the front historic part. And then we're adding on all new construction from this part on. And the new construction is going to start with sort of the management community space. So in this node here, as you enter the building, you'll have your mailboxes, you'll have a lounge, you'll have our whole suite of management offices. We'll have a full-time manager there. And then we have over on this side a community room, which we had talked about as a benefit and resource for the town. I know that you're lacking space, you're lacking accessible space. So this room here would be a great spot for meetings, and we'll make it available to the town for that purpose. I just want to throw in a couple of the floor plans just so you can kind of see how they're laid out. We're going to have a lot of mostly studios and one bedrooms. There's a few two bedrooms, and they'll be laid out in this manner. They'll all have nice sort of common area living space and the full kitchens and baths and everything. There's no laundry in the units, but for most seniors you don't do that, but there are laundry facilities on the second and fourth floor of the building. This sort of highlights, it gives you a little bit more detail of the actual, it's actually a much better drawing of the space that I was talking about with the management office on the left, the community building down here at the end, and the elevators. One of the things we really want to do is get two elevators in there. That was a lot of hard work on our architecture team's part, particularly because of having to deal with historic issues and going through. But our architects did a great job of being able to get two elevators into the building, so if one breaks down, people won't be stuck on the top floor. And we also have a generator that'll be part of the building, so that if there's a power outage, the elevators will be on the generator, and people could try to congregate in this down area if there's a power outage. This gives you the more full view of the building. This is the front again. We're keeping it all historic. We're preserving all the historic pieces. All the classrooms will be turned into bedrooms. Into units. So we're keeping everything intact. We're not, taking anything away. Obviously, the entrance will be here. You can't do the front entrance because it's not handicap accessible. So here's a little bit different than what you've seen before. We had a lot of back and forth with historic, and we've continued to refine the renovations or changes have all been on the new construction part to make it look more and more compatible to the existing part. I think our architects did a nice job of making it really blend in. It has a nice transition connector, so it'll really appear as really separate the historic from the new construction. It'll look really sharp. Just a view in relation to where it looks with Town Hall. This is from the other side of the property, you can see. And then we get into Julia Bancroft. So Julia Bancroft, similar kind of concept where we're going to preserve the front top part of the building, and we're going to tear these pieces down. We've done a nice job of having a nice connector here, and the new construction will sort of mimic the footprint of where the existing building is now that you'll be able to see. So we spent a lot of time on this node here. So as you can envision, that's the old part that will be kept to the left, and this is the part of the new addition. And the main entrance will be right here in this node with the connector right here to the old existing part of the Julia Bancroft building. Similar here, we have a little bit more space here on this site than we do on the Mary D. Stone site, so we can be a little bit more generous with our community room, our management space, and our maintenance shop. But again, similar idea that we'll have a community room that will be available to the public here as well. Again, so there was a lot of changes that have been made on this one as well to make it more compatible from a historical perspective for the Historic Commission, and I think they've done a really nice job of blending it in that you can see, so it looks very similar to the existing old part of the Julia Bancroft. And you can see the connector in that image between the old and the new. Just another view from the other side. Different angles for how the building looks. And then again, this shows how more of a detail of the connection between the old and the new, and to show that in the old part there'll be actually a fitness room and a lounge in there for the residents to use. You can also kind of see the outline here. There'll be some outdoor space for folks to gather just off of the connector, so a nice little kind of community outdoor area. This shows you how the units are actually laid out. Again, we're taking in the old existing part. Again, we're not changing any classrooms. We're taking all the existing classrooms and converting them into units. We're not taking down any walls. That's really important. And we also have a separate elevator for this building as well as for the new part. And just to throw up the future timeline again so people get a sense of it, which I was on the earlier slide. Oh, the only thing I had to mention with Bancroft is this will actually be 60 units, not 55 over here. There'll be 60 units at Bancroft. We had room to do a few more. Similar, I think on that one, we're doing like 50 affordable ones and about 10 market rate. And that's the presentation. Happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Well, that's great. Thanks for coming in and providing that for us, because it's, there's been a lot of questions asked, and it's nice to be able to see this on the board tonight so that we can explain a little bit about what's going on. But
Great.
It's exciting to see exactly what the layout is now, and that we have light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. Yep.
Is there any questions by any of the members? Yes, Ms. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is an exciting project. Residents are talking about it.
Good.
And I look at your future timeline, and I'm guessing it may be around April 2021, but if I haven't been asked by at least 20 residents, when can we get on the list? So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure.
And where in the timeline that
Absolutely,
happens?
yeah.
People are really excited about this.
Yeah. So we envision that the construction schedule will be about 14 months with the building, and we will start our lease-up activities about 6 months before the building is complete. So if you back off 14 months, around month 8 of the construction schedule. So we'll be talking about early 2021 when our leasing activities will actually start. So what we'll do is we do, the state requires a lottery. So about that time, we'll start to advertise for a lottery and have people send in their applications. It's basic information. They send it in. It has to be held open for, 30 or 60 days that we allow applications to come in. Those applications come in, we do a quick screen to make sure that they're income qualified. Some people actually are rejected at that point because they're over income. If they're close, we'll keep them in the lottery because things sometimes change. But then we'll collect all those, and then we'll have a public drawing of the lottery at that point in time. As we get up to that point, though, we'll be doing a lot of advertising. We'll advertise in the local paper. One of the things that we'll be talking to now that we've got the credits from the state is to talk about a local preference. We'll be advocating on your behalf to get a 70% local preference for Auburn residents for the first year. I assume that's what you'd like, and so that's what we would be trying to do. It's all dependent. It's fair housing issues. It depends on whether the state and the federal government will allow that, but that's what we'll advocate for. And so we'll advertise locally as well, and there'll be plenty of places to advertise to have people fill out their application and submit to be part of the process. But that'll start around the beginning of 2021.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Anybody else? Yes, Mr. LaLiberty.
Thank you. It was a great presentation, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us.
Oh, thank you.
I had a few questions regarding parking.
Sure.
Mainly because, Mary D, so there was 8 fewer spots than there were units, and then a JB would be the exact amount of units.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if there's any concern about maybe there being guests or overflow, what
Yeah.
what would happen in that scenario?
So we chat a little bit about, I mean, you have a great lot up here. We've talked about if there's a possibility we could use some of those spaces, for if there is overflow. We don't necessarily anticipate it. When you have a population like this, you're not going to have as many cars as you think. It's going to be 62-plus population. There just will be people that won't have cars. So I'm not worried about, from a marketing perspective, having less than a one-for-one. If there is an opportunity, at least for like our management folks or things, to maybe park up here, that would be great. If we can't, we'll park down there. But that's another place that could be helpful if there is any kind of a parking kind of crunch. But from a marketing perspective, I'm not concerned about it.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Barthew.
Continuing on with the parking lot and just verifying that we have the youth soccer field and fields out here. I can't remember how far into that property does does your property go that you're taking over? And so if the field is still there, would they be parking up above here? Because there would no longer be parking down below there.
Yeah, so what we typically, so a couple things to address that particular question. So our management company, when we start the lease up, we'll start to get a sense of how many people have cars. And if, we typically don't necessarily assign spaces and things like that unless we feel we have to, right? So then we'll go to that process. If there are even fewer, so what I'm getting at is that if there's not as much demand for parking and we don't do reserved spaces, then if there are additional spaces for folks to park for soccer and things like that, they're perfectly willing to use our parking lot for that purpose if that's available. In terms of the field, when we go through the process with you for the town, the back end of the parcel, we had to put some parking there. So we're taking a small easement from the town to park some of the cars there, but we're actually going to add a nice sort of walkway, if you will. We're going to dress it up nicely at that edge, so there'll be a nice walkway, and there'll be a nice, it's sort of like a separation between the cars and the field, and we'll put some benches in there for people actually to sit. The other part of our plan is that we will be providing the town with $25,000 additional to use for upgrading your playground equipment on the site. So as part of the process, we are going to have to move some of the playground equipment, but we're also going to give you $25,000 to replace it, which I think it needs to be replaced anyways. I think some of it's in a little bit bad shape, and so that would be really, a way for you to improve it. So the goal is to actually make it better than it is now.
Awesome.
Yep, through the chair, if I may add, we discussed it briefly at the last meeting also, but we are coming in for town meeting approval in May for 3 easements that are needed for this. And 2 of those easements include one for us to give to the schools. Again, this would be after the sale. Right now, we own the property, so we can't give an easement to ourselves, nor can Penrose give one to the town. But the plan is for the town to have an easement to access the fields through their driveway. So cars can go down there, drop off their kids, they can park up on this lot. We're looking at potentially putting in a set of stairs right here from the back of Town Hall, right down into the field. And there are handicap spots that will be right along the field. And we're also going to be giving an easement to Penrose, again, with town meeting approval, to add additional handicap parking spaces along that field, so that not only residents of the Mary D, but also residents coming in potentially on a weekend to watch a game or small, have their kids play, have the potential to park in the handicap spaces if they're handicapped, and then up here on the weekend when it's empty. So that is part of the 2 articles that will be going to town meeting in May.
And just to the comment I made about the strip, you can sort of see it on this slide here at the end. Right here, there's a gray path that'll be sort of like a concrete or something that we'll put in. Whoops, what just happened? Did I just step on something? Oh, there we go. As well as some benches. You can't see them, but there'll be some benches there as well.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else? Excuse me, I just can't repeat enough that I'm excited to see the project and see these buildings being used again.
That's great.
I went to school there, and now to see it turn around and something useful for the town is something the town desperately needs. And because of all this, the schedules, people know about them now.
Yep.
But I would like to say that you've worked closely with the Economic Development Office, and Shannon, thank you very much.
Yes.
And with the Town Manager's Office, Julie, thank you very much. And I'm sure you're going to be working with our building departments, Board of Health, you're going to be working with all of them.
We got a meeting set up next week.
I would like to offer an invitation to you to access the Board of Selectmen at any time.
Thank you.
Bring anything forward, and we can present it here so that the town knows about what's going on.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Well, we thank you very much for coming in, and it's waiting to get started, so come back and see us and let us know the process.
Will do. And I would echo your praise of Shannon and the town manager and all the help that they've given on this project. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming in. We'll give him a minute to, and then we'll get into our next agenda item.
While he's doing that, if I may, I want to follow up on something you said and Mr. Adams said. We have a number of meetings that are scheduled over the next couple of months with various town officials, building commissioner, planning director, DPW director, a lot of different pieces here, town council. There are legal things that we need to work on, but all of this with the intent of getting that property deed transferred in June, and the construction starting in July. So there are quite a few steps, a lot of offices involved, actually including the assessor's office as well. So I think we have a series of meetings coming up over the next couple months, and we'll keep you apprised on that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have no communications in front of us tonight. Under the Board of Selectmen general items, we have Golf New England LLC at 440 Washington Street, and this is just a change of the business name to New England Indoor Golf, and we have the application in front of us, and also we have representatives here for any questions that may need to be asked. Has anybody got anything on the name change? Well, being none, then I will ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the name change in the business as requested. Golf New England LLC at 440 Washington Street, Auburn, Mass. Be changed to New England Indoor Golf, same address, 440 Washington Street, Auburn, Mass.
Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much for coming in tonight. The next we have is Faith Baptist Church one-day outdoor entertainment license for an annual Easter egg hunt at Lemansky Park on April 4th, 2020. Do we have representatives here from, would you like to have one of you come up, or? Yes, please. Good evening. Would you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what the event is going to entail?
Sure. I'm Patty Lake, and I'm the children's pastor at Faith Church. And
I'm her boss.
you know Doug. He's my boss.
I'm Doug Gies, lead pastor at the church.
So we are hoping to have our third or fourth annual Easter egg hunt
fourth
at
now.
Lemansky Field. And we've come before you to just make sure that we're all good and that we're in agreement. It is on April 4th from 2 to 4 p.m. I do have the permit for the use of Lemansky Field. I have a few punch items that I need to take care of after this meeting. We like to give back to our community, obviously, and we find that this is a great way to give back to the town of Auburn with the kids and the families that come. We have the Easter egg hunt, obviously, which is staged in different age groups at different times. We have live music for the kids, and we just have a whole lot of fun. A couple bounce houses come in, and we
Easter
hope
Bunny will be
the
there.
Easter Bunny will be there, and we hope it doesn't rain or snow or anything else like that.
Okay, is there any questions from anybody on the board? Okay, Mrs. Goodrich, and then
Thank
to
you.
Mr. Berthew.
It's really not a question, it's a comment, because I know we have the packet in front of us, and there are some bullets that you do have to meet with DCG. But I'll just share with my board members, I've had the privilege of volunteering for their great Christmas giveaway. And they serve hundreds and hundreds. So, you look at that number, and it's maybe they're expecting 1,000 down there. They operate this like a well-oiled machine. It's not just like, let's go out to the community and do this great thing. It's a great thing with a lot of preparation put into it, and everyone has their role. They have headsets, they have communication, they have security people, especially with the young children. I never felt for a minute that a young child was at risk of being lost or wandering off. They just do an amazing job, and I fully support this.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodrich. Mr. Berthew.
Just a thanks to Doreen and an invitation to any of you if you want to get involved in this or the Great Christmas Giveaway. There are two exciting events where we can kind of give back. So open invitation to you all if you ever want to come out and have a great time.
Mr. Berthew.
So my question, and maybe a concern or not, is that, Lemansky is more and more being used as the dog walking park. Lots of dogs being walked all over the baseball, softball fields, the universal field that's right down the hill from the arena. Can you tell me a little bit more about like the Easter egg hunt? Is it plastic Easter eggs that have like little prizes in them, or?
They are, and we have a full team of volunteers. So the Easter eggs are transported over in a van. They're in boxes. The team puts the eggs out. The first stage happens. They go out, they pick up anything that's remaining that's left on the field. They set the second set up, and they do it 3 different times. And when we're done, we remove all trash and all recyclables and everything from both the field and the facility.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? No, you can see, and I will echo Mrs. Goodrich's comments, that it appears to be a well-oiled machine. I haven't been there myself, but yeah, just looking through everything that you've looked into with and explained what's going on with it, shows that you've had a lot of thought into this, and it appears to be another successful event coming forward. So congratulations and well done. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the license, provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said license subject to all the conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, and with the conditions of the DCG, which is a comprehensive list, to be placed upon the license.
Second.
Okay, so the motion been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Have you got any other questions? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And thank you very much. Congratulations and good luck. Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Okay, the next,
Yeah. Do you want to take?
yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Where are we going to be with this?
I'm sorry.
Okay, can we move up item, town manager items 6C, Auburn Street reconstruction project timeline.
So
So,
moved.
second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Through the chair,
Please.
thank you. Bill Coyle, our DPW director, is going to walk you through a very comprehensive timeline, and there'll be many updates on this as we go through the process. And as you all know, at the last meeting, you voted the Auburn Street project and moving forward on it as one of my goals. So we thought it would be important tonight to come in and show you what that entails and what types of steps we're going to be undertaking and have undertaken in this process. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Coyle.
Thank you, Julie. Mr. Chairman, members of the Select Board, and Eddie and Sharon. So I can dive into this as much as you'd like, or try to kind of keep it brief, too. But I know in your packets was a very detailed flow chart that was presented by Mass DOT's, or actually our consultant, Benas Hagen and Bussum. And this is a flow chart that they've been using since the beginning of the project, that they define the entire process, the design process, the environmental review process, historic review process, very detailed. And then I've also provided in your packets the TIP process on how the funding gets approved for the project. So what I could do is, through the flow chart, maybe just kind of point out some of the key points that's probably critical to where we are, what stage we're at, and then just give you an overview of the project. So if you don't mind, I'll put my cheaters on because it's getting harder to read these.
No.
So the project is currently at the 75% design level and is moving forward quickly to the 100% design level. So the first page of the flow chart identifies the entire process from the beginning of the design. It goes back to 2015 at the very top when the NTP, which is the notice to proceed, was issued, and just continues through the entire process. And you can see it talks about functional design report. That's in the beginning of the process. Midway down gets into 25% highway design submission, and then further down, design public hearing in bold, 75% highway design submission. So these are all major milestones for the project. And so we've actually gone past all of these steps so far. And on the second page, at the very top, prepare the 100% design submission plans. That's currently where we are today on the design of the project. And I spoke with our consultant a few days ago, and he indicated he anticipates the 100% plans to be submitted to Mass Highway by the end of March. So you can see that's a little ahead of schedule, because on the schedule, this was back in, planned on for April 20th. So we're probably running a month ahead of schedule on that. And then further down, you'll see PS&E submittal. That just means plan, spec, and estimate. That's kind of, the Mass Highway has endorsed this project, and now all comments have been addressed, and they hand over the final documents to Mass DOT to advertise it for construction. After that, you'll see these are all highway. You'll see on the left-hand side of the first column, they all say HWY. They're all highway. And then a small portion for the bridge, because I had mentioned there's a portion of the bridge over Dunn Brook, or the bridge deck, that we'll be rehabilitating in the bridge rail. And then beyond that, all the other columns are ENV for environmental. So you can see there's an extensive environmental review process, historic review, the 404 permit, that's Army Corps permit, the NEPA categorical exclusion, that's a environmental permit required by the federal government. Obviously, permitting through the local conservation commission, I believe that has already been completed. And then on the next page gets into, after the environmental review, gets into the right-of-way process. And this is probably the most critical portion of it. As far as the design, engineers design projects, we go through the process, we have public hearings, we modify plans repeatedly as you go through the process. This is the portion where the state had probably the most concern to make sure our project was going to be ready to go. So as I mentioned before, we are currently on the 2021 TIP for funding, the Transportation Improvement Program, which is the federal document, and we're trying to move up to the 2020 TIP year because there's an opening from another project that was not ready to go. And so the most important part of this project, beyond the design, because that can be expedited, but the land takings. And I'll get into that as well, but right now, we've hired an appraiser who has completed all of the appraisals that were required for the project, and has then now sent those over to a review appraiser. So because it's a federally funded project, it's not just hire an appraiser, they want you to have an appraiser, then they want another appraiser to review those appraisals. Once those are all complete, all in, we also have a separate consultant doing the title exams for all the properties as well. Those will be complete by the end of this month. So I anticipate all of the title review, all of the appraisals and review appraisals to be completed by the end of this month. So in this right-of-way section, basically what they're getting into is, once the town completes the entire right-of-way process, we then take the entire package and we submit that to Mass DOT for their review. So the Mass DOT will review the appraisals, review appraisals, title exams that have been completed, and then once they approve all of this, we can then move forward through the process, and we can, at that point, we would offer and negotiate with the property owners. So it's typically a dollar value that is presented to them. If the property owners have some concerns with the value, there is some potential for negotiations if they have very valid reasons for something that they feel as though may have been missed. But the project would move forward at that point, and the Board of Selectmen would, at probably a meeting, this showing in, I think it was in June or July, municipal approval, they had June 19th for municipal approval, record and file. So I think we're in good shape. I think a lot of where we are in the process is going to be dictated by the state. Once we submit the appraisals and title exams to them, we're kind of on hold waiting for them to get back to us on if they had any comments before we can approach the property owners. There has been continuous dialogue with all the affected property owners. The town, we sent letters out to all the affected property owners, informing them of the project, very detailed packages, because it's all required by the federal government on what goes out to the property owners. That went out, certified mail to every property owner through our office, and also through the appraiser. They also sent separate documents out to all the property owners. We also invited them to meet with us if they wanted to. We met with probably, I'd say about 8, maybe 8 or 10 property owners requested meetings. So myself and the appraiser met on site with those affected property owners. Many of them chose not to meet, might have had some phone calls, which we have to document as well. So it's also required as part of the process is that we keep a diary, and every conversation we have with every affected property owner, we have to log and indicate what was discussed, and then that also gets presented to the state as part of the process. So I think we're in good shape. I think we're ahead of probably where a lot of communities would be in this process, knowing that this is a critical step for the state to feel comfortable to continue supporting our project as it moves forward. So as part of that, I'll jump into the other sheet, because it kind of ties into the state being comfortable that this project is moving forward. So as I mentioned before, we had the special town meeting mainly because the state did not want to wait till May for a town meeting to be informed as to whether or not the town was going to support the right-of-way for this project. So obviously,
Excuse me, Bill, I'm just going to point them to, it's in the front part of your packet, the last page, prior to getting to the section on the timeline. So the last page, it has across the top draft development schedule, correct, Bill?
yes.
Am I looking at the right?
Yeah, right, should look like
Okay,
this.
so that's where he's starting. Thanks.
So the important part of the funding portion of the project is the TIP process, Transportation Improvement Program. The region, Central Mass Metropolitan Planning Organization, this area receives about $21 million per year to spread out through, I think, 77 cities and towns. So it's very competitive. Our project is at about $4.5 million, which is 80% federal, 20% state. So obviously, that's a very large percentage of the fiscal year's funding. So the state wanted to make sure that we were going to be ready to go. So in this process, I think the critical date is, as you can see, there's an outreach process, there's several meetings to get information. May 20th is when the endorsement of the final tip. Okay, so what that is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Central Massachusetts, consists of about 10 voting members. Okay, you have Mass DOT, Mass DOT's Planning Division, you have representatives of Central Mass Regional Planning, from the WRTA, I think one voting member from the city of Worcester, and then you have representatives that are regional throughout Worcester County. A project like this, they would typically look to Mass DOT for basically what they think is going to be ready to go, because Mass DOT is obviously the project managers for these projects. So if they're saying this is a good candidate to fill a gap, typically the MPO will vote to support any amendment that's being made. So because we're currently on the 2021 tip year, there needs to be an amendment to put us into the 2020 tip year. And I would expect that would occur in line with this May 20th date. Whether or not they would do it before or after, it's really up to the MPO on how that's going to work, but it's going to be in that time frame. So that would put us, assuming we get the endorsement and we move to the 2020 tip year, that would put us in line with advertisement. I think June 30th is our target date. We can advertise as late as the last day in September because it runs by federal fiscal year. But the federal government, FHWA, is pushing to advertise these projects in the end of the third quarter versus the fourth quarter. However, it can go later if necessary. Construction-wise, probably won't see much happening until a little over a year from now. I'd say spring of '21. By the time they award the project and have a contractor on board and mobilize the site, establish a field office, they're going to be into the fall, and it's not likely to see that, the road torn up for the winter. So at most you might see some utility work being done in the fall, but my guess is that most work is going to occur next spring and take the better part of a year to complete the project, with maybe punch list items the following year to be completed. So I know it's a lot of information, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, Mr. Liberty.
I just had one question. It was, do you foresee any issues for getting the amendment on May 20th? There aren't any other towns that are also...
My understanding is there is a gap of a little over $8 million right now, and I believe our town and there's one other town that the state is looking at to fill the gap. So there's two communities that they're really focusing on. I can tell you that based on the phone calls that I receive from the state, they're really pushing this project. So they want to make sure that we're going to be ready. And I think they feel comfortable that we are. So there are two towns, but the available funding would be sufficient for both of those towns.
Thank you.
Is there anything more that this board is going to have to approve, review, or do anything to make the process go along, and when do we foresee doing that?
That's going to really depend on when the state approves all of the appraisals. Once they do, I think that the next vote, and I'm going to have to, tread lightly on how I say this, but the next vote would be to actually make the takings or support the takings. And at that point, there would also be a dollar value associated with those takings. At that point, we'd have to come before the Board of Selectmen to vote that. That was what the town meeting vote was, to allow for the Board of Selectmen to move forward with the takings and the easements. And again, these are sliver takings, they're not major takings. So, people were calling it first saying, are they taking buildings? And they're just minor roadway widenings and some easements to do driveway work, aprons, and sidewalks, and utility poles.
Keep that ball rolling as best we can. As soon as we see it, then we'll move it along. And
absolutely.
Thank you for all your work. It looks like it's been quite a project so far. Just, the paperwork is always the crucial part of it. But then once it gets started, then you start to see the progress work, and you can see what's going on. So we look forward to that. But thank you very much. Anybody got anything else?
If I could just, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Coyle for all his work on this with DOT, the consultants, the appraisers. This has been a major undertaking. You'll see a report on it in the evaluation report that I just submitted the other day, but a lot of that work started last summer, or even before last summer. In the first part of your packet here, the LPA appraisal function, it's a little light reading for you this evening after the meeting's over, if you want to have some nighttime reading on how the federal government runs appraisals, but it's a very complex project, and a lot of steps involved, so I want to thank everyone who's been involved in it. And also, Bill made a good point that I just want to reiterate for the public. We are not taking major pieces of land here, property, buildings. These are slivers, because we did hear from a couple of people, oh, I hear you're taking, a building. That's not what this is. These are, just picture a roadway project where you need to have some slivers of a little bit of land into the road to widen it, put a sidewalk. So there are a total of, how many temporary and permanent? Probably
20-something total, but that includes town property as well, right?
So it is a major undertaking to get this done, but the consultants and the appraisers that we've hired have done a great job also.
They've done a great job.
They've been incredible to work with.
Great.
And again, you'll see here how they were chosen, how we select them. There's a whole process that you have to go through that we detailed in here, just as far as finding the appraiser. It's got to be on a state list. There's a lot of criteria. So the state makes sure that whomever the town hires is well-qualified, certified, and can do the job appropriately. So I just want to thank everyone.
Just if I could echo on with Julie, with the appraiser, Mike O'Hara, I can tell you that working with different appraisers, he's been wonderful. He'll be calling me on a regular basis to keep things going as well. So we've been working together on it. It's not me calling him saying, we're going to get this done. He's been right there to move the project along. I think he's recognized the importance that a lot of this is on his shoulders to get those appraisals completed so we can continue with the right-of-way process. So Julie's absolutely right. Wonderful job.
Thank you. Mrs. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just, going back to the CMMPO meeting, potentially in May, that they'll take this vote. I've attended those meetings, and I know that a lot of other people do. You're a highly respected professional amongst that organization, and we do have a representative on the board, a voting member of the representative. Do you think that this board needs to either take a position and send a letter to our representative asking them to advocate for us? Would it be helpful if any members were just there physically in support of this? I've only, in the years I've been going, only see them kind of go off track one time on a project that was in the works.
I will be attending a meeting Thursday night, the Central Mass Transportation Planning Committee meeting, and I can try to get a sense of what the feeling is from Central Mass Regional Planning, whether or not it would be something where maybe a member from the board to attend the meeting would be beneficial or not, or if they feel as though, this is pretty solid, it looks like it's going to happen, but I can report back to the town manager.
And I only ask because I've seen representatives from the town, there when their project is up, and I just want to make sure that, I have full faith in everything that you do, and I'm sure our project will get approval just from your professionalism and the work that you've put into it. But if you feel for any reason that, the chairman or whoever, is available,
Certainly,
I think we should have that discussion.
a letter of support to advance the project to the 2020 tip year is certainly a good thing. I think they recognize clearly that we do support this, and we're making every effort we can to have it ready to go. So I think we're in pretty good shape, and it would have to be something that would surprise everybody if we didn't get moved up. And if by chance that did happen, we are still on the 2021 tip year. The biggest concern would be that there's funding, that additional funding, because it's advanced, that we're, been fortunate that they're programming us for, and we would fall back to the original approval amount of the 3.2 million. So, but I'll certainly communicate with the town manager after Thursday's meeting. Thank you.
I think I would definitely agree with Mrs. Goodrich on, some sort of a letter of support, because, we have come this far, you have come this far with all the work that you've done, and for us to just turn around and a letter of support saying that, yeah, we're right on track with this, and we're right behind you 100%, I think it'd be a great thing for us. So, and if, yes, Mr. Berthium.
Is that something she would need to make a motion for?
I would, yes.
We have enough on the agenda to make that motion tonight. So I'll make a motion that we ask the town manager to draft a letter from the Board of Selectmen showing our support. We've already, sorry, Sharon, I hate talking when I'm making a motion. Draft a letter in support of moving our project up to the 2020 tip list.
Second.
Take a vote.
Sharon?
We have a vote in a second.
I just want to be sure
I'm
she has
sorry.
it,
I
yeah.
didn't know.
Okay, so the motion been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you very, very much. Thank you for all you've done, and, you know, anytime you want to come forward and just, if there's something else we can do to help you, please come forward.
Thank you. It's an exciting project. I can't wait to see it under construction, so.
Absolutely.
Another year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you very much for coming in.
Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to the agenda and vote to transmit to the town manager the budget to the finance committee in accordance with the town charter and the bylaws. And we have had the budget in front of us for a little over a week and had a chance to take a look at it. And it is part of the charter that we take a vote here to transmit it to the Finance Committee. Has anybody got any questions or comments?
Through the chair,
Yes. I'm going to just, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Eddie, would you like to make some
Sure,
comments?
thank you.
Yeah, maybe we're going to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We had these booklets available for you on Valentine's Day, so it was our gift to you on Valentine's Day. I wanted to give you ample opportunity to review the budget, review our recommendation. So let me identify some of the highlights that is contained within a $72.156 million recommendation by town administration. So what I can tell you is the day after the conclusion of the fall town meeting, we were very busy in pulling together the core elements that go into the budgeting process that led to our kickoff. And part of that process is examining and getting handling on all of our fixed costs, whether it be wages, fringe benefits, our debt, and other contractual obligations. We have to take into consideration our current debt and any anticipated debt as a result of what has been approved through various authorizations and through the 5-year capital program. So we're tweaking those numbers as we move along, and then we receive the governor's first version of the state revenue budget. And certainly, that's the only number we have, but that is a key piece that comes into play. What I can tell you is that Chapter 70 amount in the state budget early on is about a growth of about $419,000. Certainly, that's concerning to us because when we look at the 5-year average of Chapter 70, we've been averaging just shy of $900,000, $899,000. So as that revenue source is shrinking, it's putting more stress on tax levy utilization just to maintain a level services budget. So it's made things very tight and very difficult this year, and as a result, we couldn't meet all of the requested asks, specifically schools and other departments in this recommendation. So I can tell you the school department recommendation was for 3.34, both general government consisting of town departments, blended average of 2.75, as well as the school department has been recommended at 2.75. Really creates a gap of about $157,000 for the school department between their ask and what our recommendation is. We conveyed that information to the superintendent shortly before we released the budget to you. I think they're going to find that it's going to be difficult for them to live with a 2.75. In light of the fact that they had some additional special ed costs that were unanticipated after they submitted their budget. So there may be a request to go into the sped reserve account to offset some of those costs, but how that's going to impact the overall budget as time goes on is really too early to tell. This budget overall is a 1.67% increase over current fiscal year. It currently is utilizing 2.2 of a total 2.5 under Prop 2.5. It utilizes just shy of 85% of 2.5. Now, what I can't tell you, in prior fiscal year, when we went to town meeting, The utilization of 2.5 was 2.34, and we were able to offset that and get it down to about a level of 1.17. By applying a number of factors. One, our new growth came in higher than expected. Two, our health insurance costs came in $300,000 less than what we anticipated. And we were able to have some flexibility in the area of local receipts. Those three key components are still moving targets, and we hope to be able to drive down the level of taxation ultimately when we have a final budget at the fall town meeting. But what's concerning to me is the federal budget released by the president contains drastic cuts in the form of Medicare to the states. And as a result of that, I don't know what's going to happen. That could significantly and adversely affect the state budget, which would then impact our budget. So it's important that we preserve what we can in taxation if that shoe should fall and we are a victim of substantial federal cuts. We're not going to know, certainly. I don't think that would be supported by the House. But that's once again a moving target, and it's drawing some concern early on in the process. So like I said, town and school are at 2.75. I can tell you our OPEB contribution, which is positive news, is a result of our negotiations and contracts that Julie and I have settled, are resulting in an additional contribution into OPEB against our liability. Currently at about $32,000 a year, and it's growing because the school department, although their contracts are, some of the contracts are being addressed in the upcoming year, certainly the teacher's contract may allow for an additional contribution into our OPEB liability. So that's something that we're stressing and we're working on. This budget currently leaves about $181,000 of revenue that we're not committing at this time, even at 2.75. But certainly there are too many moving targets that won't allow us to earmark any of that at this point in time. In terms of budgets, there is one full-time accountant's position, town accountant's position in this budget, funded for half a year. And there's a half position, a 0.5 FTE in the school department. That's the extent of new positions in this budget request. Unlike last year, we probably had about a total of 13 to 15 new positions. So I can tell you it's going to be a tight year. We're keeping an eye on our local receipts. We built in an additional $100,000 bump because our motor vehicle came in stronger than commitment number one last year. That's already in there. We currently have some concerns about the hotel, the Fairfield, that's shut down. That may be shut down for an extended period of time. That's going to lead to a reduction in our room occupancy tax. So early on, I think we need to be conservative, we need to be guarded, and I think we have a prudent budget that's before you. We're asking that you take a vote, send it to the Finance Committee so they can begin their discussions, their deliberations beginning Wednesday night and continuing approximately for the next 8 weeks. So I don't know if you have any specific questions. I'd be happy to answer any at this time, or if you'd like to follow up and call as this is moving along, I'd be happy to field any questions.
I guess just before we get started, I guess my first question would be is, you said some anticipated expenses coming forward. Have we got any unanticipated expenses that may come back and haunt us later on that we should be stepping back and, not spending that money either?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why over the years we've built up the excess levy to provide a mechanism for some of those unanticipated costs. We set up the sped reserve to deal with some of those unanticipated costs. We're not utilizing all of our levy capacity or even our annual levy allowable growth to address situations that may pop up from time to time.
Well, I know that the sped reserve that we we had a committee, we voted that through, and it sounds like, well, sped from the school department from, what I know of it, and what we've seen here is, it is pretty volatile. And to reach into that sped account and almost draw it down, we put in money to get started, so it would help them out. But then to draw it down, then are we going to have to put more money in from the town side to kind of beef it back up again? Or are we going to be able to resolve that somehow?
Well, certainly it's early on. You're allowed to put into that account 2% of net school spending, which is about $560,000, and that grows every year that the net school spending limit is increased. They have about $350,000 in there now, so we made a good initial contribution over the last couple of years to get us closer to that 2%. That account could be wiped out in 1 year. Certainly, we've seen it before. We've had special ed costs above and beyond what was budgeted not too long ago, a couple of years ago, which really forced us to look at this sped reserve account, which was about $380,000. Certainly, we would look for ways to not utilize a sped account if we can, but that's going to mean using another revenue source that is not currently available. So it may become available as we get closer to the fall town meeting and the state numbers may change. I'm not expecting any significant change in Chapter 70 or unrestricted local aid, to be honest with you, at this point in time. That being said, I don't think there's a windfall that's coming our way. I'm not hearing of anything, but things can change very quickly, to the good as well as to the bad, so.
Thank you. Any members got any comments, questions? Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually do have a couple. Just to follow up on something you said, the school department is at a increase of 3.34, and the municipal side 2.75.
So the request was 3.34. Our recommendation to them is 2.75.
So are they, so is the school department coming in with your recommendation, or are they going to Finance Committee with the 3.34?
3.34, that's their recommendation.
So they're coming in to ask for the 3.34. Town administration's recommendation is 2.75. Okay. And that will happen Wednesday or when the school department's turn is up?
I think there'll be some discussion with the school committee at their next meeting, which I believe is the same night as the finance committee meeting, so I don't know what's going to come out of that meeting. And certainly, we're committed to looking at that just like we do any other department as things change, but in good conscience and based upon the guidance we got from the board, we had to remain conservative in our budgetary approach.
Yes, please,
So,
continue.
and just, I appreciate the work that goes into this, and I know you guys pull the strings tight to this. So this is a general question, because I was looking at some of the increases, and, they could range from I'm talking about within departments or divisions, from a 1.34 to, a 7.15. And I know that there are moving pieces, but what was your general guidance to department heads in handling these, when they were preparing their budgets?
Certainly, through the chair, we, early on, I believe at the end of November, sent an email to all department heads, including the school department, and asked them to come in with their budgets initially at a 2% increase. And we also said that we understood that there would be some contractual obligations, as well as some other unfunded liabilities, particularly I can talk about stormwater, that we knew were not going to be able to stay within that 2% range, but we thought for a basic guideline to start at the 2%. As you can see, we knew we weren't going to be able to hold it to 2% because we knew we had some contractual obligations. Where you see the differences, so overall we're at 2.75% on the town side. And similar to the schools, if you look at the school budget, some of their schools are higher than others. Some come in fairly small, some come in higher. So as long as the average comes out to 2.75, I can tell you that in some cases, we moved certain line items from one department to another. So you're going to see a decrease in one department, and you're going to see a larger increase in another department, not because their budget was up, but because we had to move money into that department to get it into the right line item. So we have a couple of those. We had a couple departments, and we talked about the fire department got the grant that we had supported. We knew we had to pay a certain percentage of it, so that amount is also built in there. But for the most part, the guidance for everybody was 2%. And again, with the understanding that if there were priorities, we knew we had to meet them, and we did our best to meet what we could. With the school department, as Ed stated, we couldn't meet the 3.34%. It was too far off from the 2%. The 2.75 we felt could be doable, but we couldn't come in at the 3 point. And the same thing with the department heads. We worked with them. If there's a way to revisit some of their requests in the fall, we can look at that. It's just too early to say right now if we should be doing that yet.
And if we met the 3.34%, we would have used all of 2.5, and certainly I think we heard loud and clear that that was not the prerogative of the board, so we're trying to hold the line, and we're still going to attempt to try to mitigate that as best we can. One other thing that I like to say is the trash, the collection is up for bid, so we used an estimate. So we know that's going to change. Certainly, the market for recyclables is changing. The market now, you got to pay just as much to get rid of your recyclables as you do your regular trash. So it's a cost that we have not had to provide for in the past. Certainly, that is going to be a major piece of the increase that we're expecting. I know the Solid Waste Committee, in conjunction with Darlene Coyle and Eileen Dyson Alexandra, they're having discussions with vendors now. So we hope to get something within the next, I hope, 60 days in terms of what our obligation is going to be starting July 1.
So if I may, that was my...
Yes,
that was
please,
my-
continue.
So that was my last question on the solid waste. So will you have a recommendation before?
I think we'll have a recommendation before town
Finance.
meeting, certainly. No, not, it's going to have to come in late to finance. And certainly that may have an impact on the fee for those that are currently using the system as well.
I'll finish up here. I'm sure I have more notes. I'll just finish up by saying, thank you for your work on this, and thank you for addressing the concern with the federal Medicaid cuts. That's a serious concern and a significant portion of the budget. And that's why I think, we've talked about it. Mr. Holstrom has said it many times, unanticipated costs, and this certainly is a real concern. So thank you for making us all aware of that and being on top of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodrich. Anybody got anything else? Okay.
I'll make a motion to transmit the town manager CFO fiscal year 2021 budget to the Finance Committee in accordance with the town charter and bylaws.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, next we have under general items, vote to schedule a meeting date for vote on appointment to fill vacant seat on the Auburn Housing Authority. Ms. Jacobson.
Through the chair, this is on here because it was a discussion at the last meeting about the process for filling the seat, and the town clerk had come in and explained it to the board. I left it on here because I know it was discussed at the last board meeting that potentially you'd have a vote. It will probably have to stay on there and just be tabled. We put it out for advertisement on the seat the day after the board meeting 2 weeks ago, and as of today, we didn't have any candidates to bring before you. There is no the deadline hasn't come up yet. There is a deadline, and I apologize, I don't have it with me. I think it's within 2 weeks from now. So I would just keep it on there, table it until we get the deadline closes for application, And again, if we don't get applications by that deadline, we'll extend the deadline. You're not under an obligation to fill the seat at a certain point. The seat would be filled until the end of the term in 2021. So there's still time, but hopefully we'll get some applicants.
Okay, so we can put that on the agenda for our next meeting then?
Yeah.
Okay, should we table that? Make a motion to table it? Okay.
But Mr., if I may
Yes,
ask a
Mrs.
question?
Goodrich.
So, there's been some talk out there that we do want to fill the seat, so would we be better off scheduling it for, say, our second meeting in March, and then if we didn't have applicants, we would just have to cancel it? Because we have to have the vote to schedule it. So rather than tabling it, would we be better off scheduling the meeting for the second Monday in March? I mean, the fourth Monday in March, and then if we still don't have any applications, continue the
Through
advertisement?
the chair, I'll just double-check what the date is that we put on the advertisement. I know it was a date in March. I'm sorry, I don't have that date with me. And if it's prior to the next March meeting, I would just recommend that you put it on the agenda after the date for application closes, so whatever that date is. So you don't necessarily have to table it? Oh, you have it? Thank you. So we did put March 13th as a deadline.
I don't have a calendar in front of me.
So the next board meeting, I believe, is the I'm going to say 22nd, maybe? I'm sorry, 23rd. So the next board meeting that would be following that deadline would be March 23rd.
I just follow those meetings, and I have a concern because a lot of times there's only 3 members, so I think anything that we can do proactively to get that seat filled would be great. So I'll make a motion to schedule the vote on appointment to fill the vacant seat on the Housing Authority for March 23rd.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have no gift acceptances tonight, and we have no proclamations or recognitions. This is kind of a, well, anyway, we'll vote on a letter of congratulations to Premier Real Estate grand opening on 1 St. Mark Street in Auburn, and would like to get a vote on that. I know that we've already sent it along.
Through the chair, thank you. This was, as you know, we received an invitation 3 days before the event from the company. They were grateful that we were able to attend on such short notice, but the invitation came in, I believe, on a Tuesday for the Friday event. So in speaking to various board members, we did put together a letter. The vice chair was in the office that day and signed the letter, and Mr. LaLiberty presented it on Friday. So
Great. Thank you.
I think
Thank
this
you
would
very
just, and thank you for doing this. It was a chair's suggestion to see if we could get a letter out, and they were very appreciative of it. So this would just basically be a vote to just confirm that you did actually send the letter.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Both been made and seconded for work we've already done. All those approve, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay. Okay, under town manager items, we had the update from the Penrose properties. And now we have discussion with the board to schedule a joint meeting with the Finance Committee to discuss the Public Safety Facilities Project. Ms. Jacobson.
Through the chair, thank you. I asked the chair to put this item on the agenda just as a follow-up to a discussion that we had, I think, 2 meetings ago. I believe it was in January, or maybe early February, no, January, that the consultants, Tecton, came in and presented to the board their findings so far on the process for the public safety feasibility study. And at that time, we presented to the board a very lengthy timeline with just some recommendations. So I just wanted to stay on track with that and find out from the board if indeed you thought it would be appropriate to look to schedule a joint meeting with the Finance Committee to talk about a public safety facility in the future, knowing that the Finance Committee meetings for this budget season are starting this coming Wednesday. We thought it'd be a good opportunity if the board wanted us to coordinate with the Finance Committee to maybe have a joint meeting on one of the Wednesday nights that they meet anyway, and potentially meet at 6, or on one of the Monday nights that you meet and potentially meet at 6. Either way, we know that they will be getting together now at this time of year, so we just wanted to banter about some dates if the board feels it's appropriate to take that next step.
Well, I guess my question is, and I know we did discuss it, that we want to put it on the agenda, but is the Finance Committee ready? Is the Public Safety Committee ready to bring information forward that we can actually look at, or is it just kind of a, you know, a general discussion on?
Through the chair, the committee did bring forward the preliminary plan. I believe you might have been, I don't think you were here that evening.
No, I wasn't.
So I apologize, but yes, they did bring forward, and there were some preliminary estimates on the project that can be discussed. They can't get too much more detailed because we won't know the costs until we actually go out to bid. And further, you won't know the costs until you identify what property you potentially would be purchasing. And you won't know what property you're going to be purchasing until you get an RFP. So there are a lot of steps between now and then. So at this point, to your point, it would be more of a generic discussion on if there was a public safety facility valued at approximately this range, how would we fund it? What would the type of funding schedule be? We did talk about it a little bit at the last meeting, that the high school debt retires in 2024, I believe in April or May. So we would not want to ban, which is short-term borrow, any of the money for a public safety facility until 2 years prior to that. We couldn't go out any further than that because you can only hold a bond anticipation notes for 2 years. So we would make sure that it was timed so that the high school debt was retired and any new debt was picked up in that same year, not before it was retired. So we do have some general parameters that we have to stay within, and we do have the general costs that were brought to us by both the committee and the consultant, that I think it's enough information to go to the Finance Committee and at least start the conversation with the board to see what the options are for moving forward.
Okay, 'cause, yeah, when you started speaking about it tonight, it sounded like the only option was to purchase land and build brand new, and I didn't know if that, you know, had been kicked around by anybody else who, you know, utilize the properties we have now and maybe do renovations, building brand new. So I guess there's a lot of action questions, I guess, that would be out there, so I just would...
Sure. Through the chair, the committee looked at all options. There were 3 options. The option was to renovate the existing buildings or add on to the existing buildings or build new. And through the consultant, and which is an engineering firm, architect firm, it was determined that there was no opportunity to build on to any of them, and there was a very expensive option of renovating those facilities that could potentially come close to the cost of building a new facility. So the recommendation at the time of the committee was to build new. So we can have the consultant, or we can have ask a member of the committee to present at Finance Committee. I think you may know that the chairman of the Public Safety Facility Committee is also a Finance Committee member. So I'm sure, Kevin Kennedy. So I'm sure he'd be happy to present what their findings were at a joint meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Has any members got any comments on this meeting? Mr. Berthium?
The only, wouldn't be a comment, but more of a request that if between now and April 15th, we do a joint meeting, that we, if it's okay with the Finance Committee, do it on a Monday night. That night's already set aside for meetings for this board member. So that's just a kind of a personal request.
Thank you, Mr. Berthium. Anybody got anything else?
Happy to meet.
Okay, then I think the general consensus here is, you know, we would be more than happy to sit down with the Finance Committee and kind of kick it around and find out where we want to go.
Right, and through the chair, thank you. We'll work around everyone's schedule, and even if we didn't schedule, you know, maybe you schedule a meeting prior to April 15th, maybe we do it after April. Just we wanted to keep on track of having the meetings, because if the board makes a determination that they want to move forward with this, they will have to have and you want to put it on the ballot, you would have to have that ballot question into the Attorney General's office for approval sometime in July. It has to be in before August. So we just want to make sure we're on track. I think my best recommendation is it will take more than one meeting with Finance Committee anyway to talk about this. It's certainly, there are a lot of things that still need to be discussed, but I think the initial meeting with Finance Committee should come up in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you.
And if there are any dates that any of you absolutely can't on a Monday night at 6, please get them to me, and we just will take those off the list.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, under tabled items, we have the voter turnout subcommittee request for board approval to develop and send out a survey to local town clerks. And I believe that came from Mr. Liberty and Mr. Carpenter, so I will turn that over to you.
Sure. So the last time we talked, we discussed the 2 surveys that we were thinking about sending out. Since then, I've incorporated the suggestions and advice from the board on the town clerk side survey, and I reached out to our town clerk. Hopefully that's okay with the rest of the board, since we had suggested sending it out from her because we didn't want to step on any toes, and she had said that she would actually prefer it going out from the board and from our side, and that she had no problem with that. She did express interest in being connected in so she could see the results come in. Using Google Forms, which is something that I've used before for surveys, I know how to do that, so that would be my preferred method, and then I could link her in so she could see the results come in along with Mr. Carpenter and myself. So I think that one is all set, ready to go. That's through an email, so it would be no cost, and we could get that out whenever the subcommittee meets and votes to do it. The other survey, which actually had we were discussing using paper copies and sending that out. That one, we haven't scheduled a meeting for the subcommittees in between our last meeting of the full board, so I think we may want to meet to discuss some of the concerns there, but Mr. Carpenter can speak to what his thoughts are on that section. The residential survey was certainly more Mr. Carpenter's idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's imperative we can't just have an electronic format for the resident, because not everybody is tech savvy, and we want to get outside of things that would be barriers for people to respond. So there's going to be a cost to that. There's no way not to have a cost to it. We had discussed possibly having it at the senior center and at the Auburn Public Library, if we could get the approval of those departments to host it there, and then we would pick them up and tabulate them. I think you guys discussed that at the last meeting, so there would definitely be, a cost to that. But I think it's worth it because, again, not everybody is tech savvy and not everybody wants to be on a computer. They would like to take time, take it home, review it, think about it, and send it in or drop it off, however they like to do it. So,
Well, I would make a comment on what Mr. LaLiberty said, something about the town clerks. The town clerks, it is budget season, and I know they don't get that involved with budgets, but there are elections coming up, and I know they're very busy at this time of the year, and I don't know how much of a response you would get, because there would be more important things on their docket than there would be to have ask a question on what do you think about, participation in an election. So I don't know if you've thought about that or not. And as far as the having at the senior center, the library, any of these public buildings, putting a survey out, it's only as good as the people coming in to pick them up. And sometimes the only people that you would get to have that kind of a survey done is those people that are interested. And, our response for elections, not to say that it wouldn't be a good thing to bring more people out, but, a 9 or 10% election participation is, we'd be very fortunate to get a 9 or 10% participation in a survey response. So it's something of food for thought and just something I wanted to throw out there. Mr. Berthium.
So question on the electronic version, which is the no-cost version. Do we have a database of people to send to, email addresses, and approximately how many would we be sending?
So the database is available at the Secretary of State's page, Secretary Gallivan's page. Every town clerk in Massachusetts' email is listed. We hadn't discussed, we wouldn't send it to all 351 communities, but I would imagine we'd send it out to Worcester County, the surrounding communities, and then if there were any others of interest to the committee for whatever reason, if a town had a particular event or something that drew our attention, then we might send it to them. But I would think it would be fairly limited to in and around Worcester County.
Okay. So if we were to send that to the town clerks in this area, are we asking them to then send it to a database of any emails that they have within their community? Is that how we're trying to trickle it down?
No.
Two different surveys.
Right. Right.
Maybe we should talk about the surveys.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. So the first survey would be the one to town clerks, and that's asking questions specifically geared towards the clerks. So they would be filling it out themselves. It's not a time-consuming survey because of the issues or problems mentioned by the chair. It is election season, and the clerks, it's a busy time with the primary. And of course, they're coming up on their annual town elections as well. So hopefully, I looked at it, it should be 5 minutes. Of course, they can take more time because some of the questions are short answer. So if they had the time and wanted, they could add a little bit more to it. But hopefully, it would be pretty short, and they would get those through their email, take the time and fill it out. And as soon as they fill it out and press submit, it's automatically sent back to the Google Forms that Mr. Carpenter and myself, and I'll include our town clerk in as well, will have access to actually viewing the results as they come in. The second survey that we had discussed would be both paper format and electronic format geared towards residents in Auburn.
So and that's the one I'm referring to, is the one that would go to the residents. Do we have a database of Auburn residents' email addresses, and do we know how many there are?
To my knowledge, we don't have that. The best, at least for emails, the best thing that we were thinking would be to use the town social media pages. I think that's all that was used when we did the survey for the water park, but the town manager can probably speak to that a little bit better.
We posted it on our social media, on our website, and we put notification of it on Auburn Cable TV, the website, the newsletter. But yeah, we didn't send it to anyone. We had notification that they could go online and take it, because there's no way to send it.
So we have the survey out there right now?
No, this was, I'm sorry, Mr. Liberty was asking me how we posted the survey on the swimming pool.
Oh, swimming pool, okay.
Yeah.
So my recommendation, or I think we should go ahead tonight and get that first social media survey out there and see what we can get for some results before we okay any expenditure of any written surveys. Certainly I want to do the written as well, but if we put the social media out there and we get, like Mr. Holstrom says, 1% or less than 1%, I mean, are we really doing the town any good by spending money trying to get further surveys? But I'm hoping that we would get some response from the social media, but I don't think we should hold back and wait any further. I think we should just go ahead and get that out there. I read the survey questions that were going to go to the voters, and I thought they were great questions, and it didn't take a long time to get through, and I'd love to see what some of the results are from that.
Okay. Mrs. Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm going to address them separately, my comments. So the first one is to the survey to the town clerks. So when, as you know, at the last meeting, I was the one that had some concerns and thought the town clerk should be involved, sending the survey out on behalf. If that wasn't clear, I apologize. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, not taking it away from us. But, I agree with the town clerk that it should come from the Board of Selectmen at this point. I didn't realize you had already been in communications, so you've already opened the door with the other town clerks. So I think where the board or subcommittee has already begun communicating with the town clerks, I think it's absolutely appropriate that it come from us and the town clerk seems to be in agreement with that. When it comes to the survey for our residents, I struggle with this. I agree with Mr. Carpenter. I mean, I look at social media. I bring a lot of issues or comments to the town manager's attention on social media. I'm not sure that, how you guarantee, because we have a lot of people who may not necessarily be Auburn residents who are commenting on Auburn activities. And as Mr. Carpenter said, if we just strictly use social media, you've left a whole sector of residents out. And so are we saying we just want to do social media and target social media? Even if we don't get a good response, we don't know what type of response we would have gotten from people who don't use social media. Yet, I'm not willing to say right now, let's spend the money on it, because we don't know what that cost is. So I think I would support tonight, I would support sending the survey out to the town clerks, but I think that we still need more work on how we're going to do a survey for the residents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodrich. Mr. Berthium?
I'll just reply to that, in no way am I saying that we shouldn't do a letter to the residents and for those people that aren't tech savvy. But why are we holding back data that we can get? With a good questionnaire, any information that we can get, and realistically, even if somebody from Millbury wants to fill it out, I think it's good information for us to figure out what's in the mind of these voters. Why, is softball or soccer more important than voting for a town official? I just feel like it's a non-committed survey. Let's get it out to as many people as we can, get the feedback, and, again, if there's no feedback, we have to look at it and say, all right, do we spend any money to try to go a different route? But I think to not get information that's potentially out there for free on a well-written survey already, I just feel like, why are we waiting? Something has to give. We're getting crappy turnout, and we're not the only town that's getting that. So somebody's got to start somewhere, and I just don't want to hold off on it. I want to get some information, and I appreciate the subcommittee and what they've done, and I don't want to keep holding back on it. Personally, I mean, we can kind of know what the town clerks are going to say. They're already agreed that it's crappy turnout. I want to know what's stopping the voters from coming out. I want to know why we have 15,000 voters and only 1,100 show up to vote.
Mrs. Goodrich?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I know, I'm not sure if it was a dog park or the swimming pool. The director up at the senior center had the surveys and gathered some information up there. So if we do want to send this survey out to residents, I would ask that it at least be made available, like Mr. Carpenter said, at the senior center, make it available at the library and at the town offices. But also I would ask that we include the question, are you an Auburn resident? And I'll just, I'll just share the story because I will. I came in tonight and the town clerk had said we had 150 early voters already today. First day of voting, and we had 150, and that was early. Like, there was a line, and you don't know how badly I wanted to go up to the people in that line and say, hey, you're voting in the presidential primary. Do you vote in the municipal election? Why is it that you vote in a in a presidential primary, not even the presidential race, you're voting in the presidential primary, but if they say no, why aren't you voting in the municipal election? Because we know that the number's going to be much higher for this presidential primary much higher than the municipal election. If there was a way to, exit polling, whatever you want to call it, I'd do it, but I just, those are the people that we need to get to, the people who are voting in presidential races, presidential primaries, then the state elections, going in descending order. Those are your numbers. In our presidential elections, we get 80% of the voters. Maybe at the presidential election in November, we hand out surveys because we're going to see all those voters. I know it's time, I know we're concerned about numbers. I don't believe it's going to, even if we take action today, it's not going to matter in this May's election, which is right around the corner. But we can stay with this. We have a presidential race right in November. If we all put our thinking caps on, we may be able to capture some good information on that day.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodrich. Mr. Carpenter?
Yeah, I would say we could move forward. Part of the reason we were going to the town clerks was to see what they're doing, if anything, to promote town elections. So we were using that kind of as a stalking horse before we went to the residents. I don't think the resident survey is going to cost a lot of money. I don't think it's going to cost, it's going to be paper and toner. And, well, we're not mailing. We're just going to bring it. No. That's not realistic. That's too cost prohibitive. And, so for me, when this was brought up, it was not meant to be, a 4-month process, a 6-month process, a year process. It's how do we get outside of the bubble? Because if we just do what we're already doing, we're going to get the same result. So social media is great for the town, social media. It's limited. People need to be interested. It's just like Code Red. If you want to know, you're going to go on the website and you're going to sign up. A lot of people aren't, I can say in my regular job, we spend all this money to put together a first-class, website to give all this information, and people are still coming in the old-fashioned way to try and get the answers from a person. So I think we need to get outside the bubble and not necessarily rush it. I think I would like to hear from the town clerks first, see what ideas they have and what's working for them, what's not working for them. And, I think there's some other things. We have some draft language in a small report that I wanted to talk with Mr. Liberty as the subcommittee, which I think informs the residential subcommittee, the residential survey as well. So, we're talking about 10 questions. We're not asking people to, give blood or anything, for 20 minutes. It's going to be quick, and yes, the clerks are busy, but they're always busy. It doesn't matter when you send it. Nobody's begging for things to do. We need to ask their opinion. I think they're a good resource. Let's see what we get back from them, and then let's have further discussions on the residential one, which I do agree is, I think we have some nice questions, but I think that's, we could still look at it, and there might be 1 or 2 more questions that we want to add, and people might think of between now and when we want to launch it. So I would support going to the town clerks and asking the subcommittee just to meet and talk over some other things, and then we could come back and see where we're at once we hear from the town clerks and we're able to give you some further information.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mr. Berthium?
So, Mr. Liberty, are you in agreement with that? I'll obviously support whatever the subcommittee's wishes are, but is that something that you want, or would you rather pursue or additionally pursue the electronic to the residents as well?
Well, I'd absolutely like to move forward with the town clerk's survey tonight, if at all possible, since it seems we're all in agreement. That's a pretty easy one to move forward with. I certainly wouldn't mind breaking up the residential survey, but if Mr. Carpenter thinks that there are questions that we may want to add or change as a result of the town clerk survey, then I think it may be best to hold off on it until we meet and maybe get some of the results from the town clerk survey. Other than that, if we weren't going to change any of it, I would say, yeah, that we should move forward tonight and try to send those out as well, at least on social media sites. But given the chance that we may want to change questions, then it may make sense to hold off until we can meet again as a subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Liberty.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, please,
Make a
Mrs.
motion
Goodrich.
that we authorize the subcommittee to send out the survey that was presented at our meeting to the town clerks in Worcester County.
Is there a second?
Specifically Worcester County.
Second.
You got that, Sharon? Okay. So the motion been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. There is no public comment for tonight. Have any of the board members got anything for tonight? Other than what we've been through. Can I go to Mr. Papanovich or Ms. Jacobson? Anything from you?
No, you're all set.
Motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you and good night.